Hello, I'm Kyle Smith, here today live from EWG-TV. Here we have a special guest, Mrs. Reynolds. And Miss Reynolds is here with us from the Exeter Historical Association and is here to talk to us about the Wilcox House. Mrs. Reynolds, could you tell us a little bit more about the Wilcox House?
Sure, Kyle. Good morning. The Wilcox was sort of a bed and breakfast that was established in Escoheag, Rhode Island in the late 1800s. If you're familiar with Escoheag, you know it's part of Exeter and West Greenwich in the western part of the state near the Connecticut line. And it was a very, very isolated place. And so this Mrs. Phoebe Wilcox ran the bed and breakfast from 1893 through to maybe the 1920s, and then someone else took it over, one of her daughters, and then it became the Perkins. So people used to come from far and wide to stay there on holidays and weekends to go hunting, fishing, hiking in the woods, things they couldn't get in the city.
Now, how would the travelers get from wherever they were to the Wilcox House, and what is the difference in the transportation between today and back then?
Well, in the original days, they would come on the train to Greene, Rhode Island, which is western Coventry, and then they would take a stagecoach, or they would get a ride with the mail man that would be coming in a horse and carriage to Escoheag to deliver the mail. So it might take them, sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours once they got to Greene. So this was a full day trip from Providence. So this, when they came, they would have to have like 3 or 4 days, because it would take a day to get there and a day to get back. Yeah.
Was the Wilcox House, was that well known throughout the state and throughout many of the residents of Rhode Island at the time?
Probably not through the whole state, but there was an article in the Providence Journal called Pleasant Places in Rhode Island that was published in the late 1800s that told more people about it, and perhaps that might be some of the reason why they got more well known.
Would you say the Wilcox House is a lot more well known today than it was back then, and more people know about it?
Well, absolutely. Probably nobody knows about it today. That's why we're doing this project. I got to know about it through a lady named Betty Cotter, who was a professor at URI. She's a writing professor, a local author who's written a couple of books, and has also she's a granddaughter of the people that lived there then, and so she used to go there in the summers. And she was able to look through the guest books, which I have here. These guest books are over 100 years old, and she would spend her summers looking at these books and becoming familiar with the people who wrote in them. A lot of the people who came didn't just sign their name in to say, I'm here for the weekend. They wrote poems, they wrote stories, they drew pictures. And in fact, this picture here that's right on the screen is a drawing of the Wilcox that was that's in one of the journals that one of the guests actually drew on one of the pages. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So obviously nowadays we see these things as artifacts and we discover them later on. What is unique about these guest books that you recover from the Wilcox House?
Oops. Well, in particular, Betty Cotter wrote about a group called the Gang, and they were 5 college boys that came from Brown University and some later Harvard that would come out there fishing and hunting, and they would draw pictures, they would write poems, and they came for a span of like 20 years. So they're like the main theme that goes through all of these books. And it kind of follows their life in a way and tells what they did when they got there. And this is part of why we want to preserve this history, because it's a little bit more than just a journal.
Yeah, that's amazing. You said you met Betty Cotter. What information did you find out about him that you didn't know before? Or?
Well, I didn't know about the journals. Betty Cotter, who's, like I said, is an author, had written this book, Roberta's Woods, and she came to do a book tour with us at the Exeter Library. Oh, wow. And the book actually centers around the same house, the Wilcox. So through that, I got to know about her staying at the Wilcox and also about the journals. And so she let us borrow these books, and we were able to digitize them. And so now we have them, and we'll, have to give them back to her at some point. But so we want to try to preserve the history and
Absolutely.
perhaps have a presentation that the people of the town can come and see and learn a little bit more about the history of the late 1800s, early 1900s, how life has changed in Exeter and West Greenwich from those days.
Wow,
And yet some of it is the same because we still have hunters and fishermen come out here by the droves, just not one or two at a time, which is what happened back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Well, we're going to take a short break now, and then we'll be right back.
It only takes a second for an accident to occur. Take responsibility. It can wait.
Wow, powerful PSA on drinking and driving. That's definitely something that has changed since the 1800s. They probably didn't have that back then, but that's not good. But
Certainly.
welcome back. And our next question is, throughout history, there's always something significant that happens. What would you say something significant that happened, an event at the Wilcox House that is not very well known to the community?
Well, every once in a while, we still have it pop up that there was a disaster there one evening when two people got into a little bit of a row, and it got into the paper. Albert Wilcox, who was the brother-in-law of Phoebe Wilcox, was there one evening, and he was kind of feeble. He had rheumatism and couldn't walk well. And one of the guests at the house that had been staying there was a little unstable in his head, so to speak, and went after Mr. Wilcox with a knife, and then he tried to commit suicide. His name was Mr. Phillips. And then, so Mr. Wilcox went after him to try to get the knife away, and then Mr. Phillips hit Mr. Wilcox with an axe in the head. And so it actually got in the papers somehow, and this is the crazy thing, in, this isolated area of Exeter, somehow the paper showed up.
Yeah.
And then they put it in the newspaper. And so it got pretty well known at that point, what happened at the Wilcox. It didn't seem to affect the guests any, or it didn't show up in any of the journals.
Yeah.
But, and I understand that both men did survive and, were okay afterwards. But I don't think Mr. Phillips stayed there anymore.
Would you say that after all this news got out about the attempted murder, that the community changed its view on the Wilcox House at all, or was there really no significant change?
No, didn't seem to. Like I said, I've looked through the journals, and I see no mention of it. So it didn't. I think maybe there wasn't anybody there that weekend. Not sure. Check the dates.
What would you, like the community of Exeter today, know about the Wilcox House and any information that you'd like the town to know about it?
Well, like I say, through the guest books, it's very interesting because people wrote poems, they wrote stories, they drew pictures, and they actually show the history of the area at that time period. In fact, here's one little poem that is in one of the journals. This is from December 27th, 1902. From Escoheag's icy mountains to Beach Pond's frozen shores, we tramped the landscape over and trapped for fish galore. Will Andrews cooked the fodder while Frank Stark cried for more. and scratched matches on his trousers till their usefulness was o'er. And that's the kind of thing that's in these journals. And it, you know, it's amazing the stories and the pictures that are in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'd like to maybe make a presentation that we can share with the town.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's very interesting to
Yeah.
see how it was back over 100 years ago.
Right, and this
now.
is what Beach Pond looked like back then,
Yeah, big
1880.
difference.
Yeah, and like I said, people came from all over. Some of the people that are documented in the guest books are most of them are pretty local, because it even coming from Providence would take so long to get there. But some are from further away that were maybe coming through visiting family and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking I can get in my car and go to Beach Pond in 30 minutes, and they had to plan it around days at a time. It's
Yep.
big difference now.
It is, certainly is. Yeah.
But that's all we have for today. We thank you very much for your time, Mrs. Reynolds, and informing us on the Wilcox House. And
Thank you, Kyle. It's been great.
thank you, Mrs. Thank you, Mrs.